Simon, great to have you here at Noise11.com, the new boy in the band of such a legendary band. Let's start off by you telling us how your audition went.
Well, there was no real audition at all. It was just kind of in 2021 hinted that they may needed somebody to replace Steve as a depth for a couple of shows. Just that was all in February 2022. I think it was in the US, a US tour or something like that. And but anyway, Steve, he did those shows. So then they asked me about possibly doing some more shows. And at this stage, it was always like it was possible of doing shows. And I was like, okay, whatever. So then I ended up doing the shows in May. It was, I think there was 2 weeks or something. And so I did those and they went great and it was great fun to do. And then they asked me to do another couple of months later in June, July, I think, because Steve unfortunately couldn't commit because of his wife's condition and so on. So and then it just got to the stage, to be honest, they had to come to a decision because Steve couldn't commit to touring anymore, and so they just had to make a decision really. But there was no really audition for me because I played with Ian Gillan before for on a few tours, and I did a couple of live records with him. And I've played with Airey for the last, I don't know, 16 years. So I have. So for those two, it was an easy choice. It was, because I knew them, and I was kind of more of, they knew what I can play and how I do that, but it was more just because I get on with them and my personality, if you want to call it. Because that sometimes in a band is a little bit more important. Obviously, if you're a good player, it counts. But and I've met Roger before, and I played with Roger before, and Paice as well. But it was never ever all at the same time. So it was an interesting, journey into the band.
How far back as a listener to Deep Purple, as a fan of Deep Purple, do you go?
Oh, I go back, it was right back till I was a kid. I started playing guitar when I was 9 years of age. And, like any kid, Deep Purple will always be there, in some shape or form. It's funny because people always ask me, was Smoke in the Water the first thing that I learned? And I go, no, I actually never played Smoke in the Water until 2016 when that was with Ian Gillan. I don't know why, because I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and I suppose and I used to get it in a lot of music stores. You used to have these big signs up that said "No stairway, no smoking the water, no enter." So I don't know. So yeah, but I always knew who Deep Purple was, and I learned various other things like Black Knight and stuff like that. So yeah, I think if you're any sort of rock guitarist that's came from the last 20, 30 years, Deep Purple has to be in there as an influence at some point.
My
Right?
first introduction to Deep Purple in rock when I was 12 years old. So, I've got a few years on you there,
Yes.
Simon. But, even at that point, that was my entry level to Deep Purple. I had no idea that Ian Gillan wasn't the lead singer of Deep Purple or the original lead singer of Deep Purple until many, many years later when, Fireball and Who Do We
Yeah,
Think
yeah,
We Are and, a whole series of other albums started to be released. That
yeah.
then I went back prior to uh, Deep Purple in rock, only to discover that Ian came in at that level as well. So Ian's entry level into Deep Purple was the same as mine.
Yeah, it's a funny thing with Deep Purple. There's been so many variations of it over the past, but I think well, not the most important, but the most influential in the music industry was the period of time with Gillan and Pacey, Blackmore, Lord, and Roger Glover. Obviously, that was because I suppose that was the big time in their career. But the way I look at it too is I look at any band though that period of time for music was amazing because everybody loved music back then, and we didn't have iPads or iPhones or internet or anything like that, so all people had was music really, and that's why a lot of those bands went huge because people loved it, and obviously the music is amazing too. So it's but Yeah, it's funny when you actually read the history on bands, you go, oh, that's not the original lineup that I thought it was. You always think it's the ones that did Smoke in the Water, but it's not. The only, Pacey's the only one that's been there from day one, really, and which, yeah, and he's still here.
And he's still around. The album Equals One is when I first heard it, it is absolutely incredible that this band at this period in time has recreated a sound. I'm hearing sounds on this record that could have, like Lazy Sod, for instance.
Yes.
That wouldn't be out of place in the past. So many of these great songs on this album could fit onto Fireball, could fit onto Machine Head, could fit onto In Rock. Was that something that you were trying to aim for when you went into the studio?
Not really, to be honest. I think what you're hearing is just a combination of the five of us, playing in a room together, and a lot of people kind of forget that a big influence on Deep Purple's earlier stuff was, it was Gillan and Roger and Pacey. That they have it, that no matter what I play or whatever Dawn plays, when they play along with you, it starts to sound like Deep Purple. It's just like, okay, here we go. I could play the most craziest, wackiest prog rock riff or something, but once Pacey plays along to it, it's like, okay, we're now back in Deep Purple. So it's incredible, it's the characteristics that they bring to the music. So there was no real intention to go a certain direction. For me, as I said, I grew up in the kind of late 80s, and so I was more hard rock, which was my influences. And so that's kind of a natural thing for me to do. So I just kind of went play a lot of guitar riffs, whereas the likes of, when Steve was in the band, Steve was amazing, but Steve comes from a different background. He's more, I'm going to say, progressive and more of that country rock thing going on. So it's a little bit different. He doesn't think like me, like most guitar players. We don't think the same. So I think more kind of guitar riffs and stuff like that. And so I brought a lot of stuff to the table, but essentially it was just the five of us in a room, just jamming and having fun. That was it, really. And to be honest, it seemed to click really quickly. I think most of the songs on that record were the basis of them was done in the first writing session, and each one took about 10 minutes. I think, there were certain songs which took a lot longer, like Bleeding Obvious, which was a bleeding nightmare, but that's fine.
Yeah, but Bleeding Obvious is one of the tracks that's already been performed live. Portable Doors made the set list. Lazy Sod has been played live. A bit on the side. There's a few songs that have been played live already off this album, but I guess the reality is there's a lot of music on this record, 13 songs, and many of these songs will probably never be performed live by Deep Purple.
Possibly, yeah. The thing is, well, you never know, because we always say that. That is always the thing. There's always songs that work better on a record, and there's always songs that work better live. And then there's songs that work better on record, don't work live as well. So it's like, but in rehearsals, before we started this tour there in May, we 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 played every song on the record, and unfortunately, everyone works live. We were like, oh crap. We can't really change the whole set to the whole new album. So we have that luxury now that every song works live. We've tried it and it works. So we may do them all. You never know. At some point in time, who knows? We'll see. We have to, the big problem with Deep Purple is that they have so many other big hits that you gotta play. You can't just cut out Smoke in the Water or Black Knight or Lazy or whatever. So but yeah, there's 13 songs on the album, and there was so much more as well done, which we just had to go, okay, these are the 13 which are going on the record. But yeah, there's a lot of different things in there. So it was, but that was just having the freedom just to do whatever we want. And that was it.
Equals One being your first Deep Purple album, I guess also means that it's your first Bob Ezrin album.
Yes.
What a legendary man Bob is. Tell me
Yeah.
about being in the studio with somebody who produced Pink Floyd The Wall. He's done Kiss albums. He's done Alice Cooper albums. And of course, he's been working with these guys for over 10 years. So You must have had to pinch yourself at certain times when you're coming to work each day.
Yeah, well, to be honest, before we did it, I knew Bob Ezrin was a legendary producer and all that, but I it's like when I first played with Deep Purple, I never really thought too much about it. I don't really get too, what they call starstruck, if you want to call it, because that affects your judgment and affects how you play and affects how you think a little bit. So with Bob, I was like, there's a certain level of respect. Yes, of course, you have to. Um, but Bob's an interesting character. He's very old school. He bust your balls. That's what he does. He's I and it, he for us, for me and him. He'd never worked with me before, and I'd never worked with him before. So we were kind of, it took us about 2 weeks to stop fighting with each other.
What were you fighting over?
I say fighting. We were just kind of just figuring each other out a little bit, because Bob likes to push you in certain ways for a good reason to get you out of your comfort zone, but he just didn't know how to do it with me, whereas he's done it with the rest of the guys. He knows how to work them. Uh, for me, it was a case of I'm very stubborn, and if he says something, I just go, I don't like it. I don't agree or whatever. And he's like, oh, right, okay, So, but but that's the natural thing of working with a producer. They're going to say something, and you may not like it, and vice versa. But the great thing is about Bob, he's very open, and open to listening to what we have to say because we are the band, the musicians here creating the stuff. But for us, it's also very important to have somebody there like Bob because he is like the sixth member who has an outside opinion and comes in and goes, nah, I don't like that. Do that. Because sometimes you get when you write stuff, you get too close to it, and everything you think we'll have to keep every single part in. And Bob's go, nah, get rid of that. That's rubbish. You're like, okay, fair enough. Because you do need that opinion. And so I remember there was one point it was just I had a disagreement with Bob, and you know, and it's fine now, but I remember going, who says Bob Ezrin dude anyway? And I went and looked through his discography, and I went. Oh, okay, fair enough. It's like, okay, he wins. But no, Bob's great. I get on very well with Bob. As I said, it was just like it's like anybody working together. It takes a few weeks for us to figure each other out a little bit. But after that, we get on like a house on fire. It was great.
How did the album title equals one come apart about? Is that like a group discussion, or did someone just come in and say, "Here's the album title"?
Well, that is the wonderful world of Ian Gillan's brain. Right there. Now, Ian generally does all the lyrics. Him and Roger. Roger would help him a little bit, but most of it's equals one was Ian's idea. Even the graphics on the album, that's Ian's handwriting basically, because he wrote it down one day and he's like, we all said, "That's it. That's really cool. We loved, the cover or whatever." So, but equals one is really. I mean, to get a more intellectual answer and not a dumbass guitar player version, but I'll give you the dumbass guitar player version. Uh, it's really from what I think Ian was trying to do something silly one day, like sign up for internet or something like at his home. And he had all these options and things he had to do just to get internet, you know? And so it's the same with that big long equation. You see this big mad equation with all these different mathematics and algebra and all this stuff, but the answer is one, right? When you simply could have went 5 - 4, it's one. Same result. You cut all that crap out and you have that. So it's about that from Ian's point. It's we live in a world which they try to make things easier, but they make things a lot more complicated by adding all these cookies and things on websites. And
Mm.
it's like, whereas you can just go like it's like even going through airports, we have to fill out all these forms and stuff to get into the airport or into the country. Whereas used to be before you walk up with your passport and guy looks at it and looks at you and you go, okay, there you go. But the other thing is Roger's interpretation of it is where it could be the life of the band. It's because Deep Purple has been complicated. Let's put it that way. But at the end of the whole thing, it equals one, which is Deep Purple. It's still the same. Nothing changes. It's still Deep Purple. No matter who's in the band, whether there's different guitarists or different keyboard players or whatever, or different singers or whatever, bass players, whatever. It's went through a numerous amount of changes, but it still equals Deep Purple. That's it. You can't change the sound of that.
I can't tell you how disappointed I was that we didn't get to see you a few months ago in Australia. You
Yeah.
almost got here. It would have, like, I went to the show. Alice Cooper was brilliant, Blondie brilliant, Psychedelic Furs brilliant,
Yeah.
but we didn't get
Yeah,
the people.
we were very disappointed ourselves. We were actually very excited to go down and down to Australia and play it, but it was just matters out of our hands that we couldn't do anything about it. It's nothing. We wanted to be there. That's all I can say. Legally, all I can say is we wanted to be there. That's
Okay. All right.
nothing to say about it.
Yeah, we don't want to get into the legals and, behind the scenes and all of that. But when are you going to make it up to us?
Well, if I had my way, I'd go tomorrow, but who knows? Maybe next year. We'll see. It just depends on if different things. When it comes to booking gigs, I don't take anything to do with that. It's usually the agents and the managers and all the people. They sort all that stuff, but they know we want to go back and do Australia. Because I think the guys in Deep Purple haven't done Australia in a while now. I think it's been several years or whatnot. So, but hopefully this album, maybe the album will go #1 in Australia and we'll have to go back.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I think the last time Deep Purple were in Australia, I'm thinking it was that really oddly matched tour of Journey and Deep Purple together.
Yes, I think you're right. I think you're right. I remember them talking about it, saying it wasn't the best tour in the world, as they say. So, but yeah. Well, who knows? I'd say, hopefully, maybe next year we'll get to Australia. It's the problem is with going to Australia. It's because we do everything old school, right? And we bring all the backline, everything with us. It's the cost of getting from here all the way over down to there, unless there's a load of other stuff as well. So there's a lot more involved in for us anyway, than say some of the other bands. Like I know Alice Cooper has a big production and stuff, but they don't use any amps or anything on stage. It's all like Kempers and digital model stuff, which sounds great. But that's, in Deep Purple, that's frowned upon. It's like no digital, just okay, fair enough, which I'm happy about.
Yeah. When I spoke with Roger Glover in 2020 for the Whoosh album, he indicated that was the last of the Deep Purple albums. There would be no more. Of course, there's been 2 more now. So I'm not even holding out that this is the last album. Are you even contemplating doing a podcast like this?
Well, yeah, there's talk of doing another one, at the end of the year, so because we tour and the tour finishes in I think middle of November this year, and I think there's talk of starting a new record. So, but we'll see. It's just in the talk stage at the minute, so we'll see. But yeah, it's one of those things when you're in a band and music is your life. It's nobody can ever say that this is the last one. That's never the truth because once you're a musician, it's like a drug, as I say. You just can't stop, until something takes it out of your hands that you have to stop. So yeah, never say never.
I wasn't expecting Turning to Crime. I was definitely not expecting Equals One. I'm really, really glad, even for me as an old Deep Purple fan dating back to 1970, that we got a couple of bonus albums. So it's good to hear there might be more.
Yeah. It's I said we all enjoy writing music, and the last album came together so quickly. So it's kind of like, well, let's see if we can do another one. Who knows? We'll see.
All right. Simon McBride, great to have you here at noise11.com.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.